Hey guys, Lyndon here from Visionary Universe. Today we're going to be doing something pretty iconic, and that's keying out green screens. So keying is one of the first things you start learning because, like I said, it's a very iconic Hollywood compositing technique, and it's a really clever way of isolating, or in a sense, rotoing selective sections of your screen, allowing flexible compositing as the artist sees fit. So green screening is very revolutionary for visual effects and movie magic. So I don't know, this may be somewhat of a far-fetched idea, but my goal with this video is to make it the best, most informative, knowledge-compacted, technique-rich keying video up to date. So I've really done my research and carefully put this episode together to possibly reach that goal. So I've actually written down a huge list of all kind of keying techniques and stuff, so hopefully we can cover all those today. I've actually got so much more I want to talk about, but of course we don't want to make this video too long, so this video is definitely going to be a journey, so stay tuned, keep watching, all that good stuff. So I want to start off here with a little bit of cool knowledge, and this is probably something that everyone has wondered in their own minds before and probably figured it out. But why is it that we use green screens? And basically the answer essentially is because green on average is the least most common color you'll find in any standard object. And I have a little experiment here that kind of tests that out. So basically this is just like a bunch of objects here, just random objects just put together, and we're going to see kind of what the average color is here. So I just kind of took out the whites and some of the blacks, fast blurred it together, turned up the opacity, blended it together. So I'm kind of getting the average color here. So this is what we're going to do. This is kind of the average color. We can turn up the saturation if we need to. This is the average color basically you're going to find in objects. Kind of a reddish, orangish, brownish, even some magenta in there. So basically we want the screen to be as far from that as possible. It needs to be the opposite color so that when we take out the green screen, it won't take out the subject or the foreground. So let's invert it. We're going to invert this to see what color that green screen should be. On average it should be about a green, so kind of a cyanish green screen. And we can even use a color control to just kind of choose this color to see where it lies on the color palette. So you can see here that's pretty close to cyan here. It's kind of a greenish cyan. On average, I did several tests, like even more tests, and on average it came out with this about the same hue right there. And this is actually an example of just other objects, and then we have another one of like clothes. It also depends on how we invert. If we invert the red, green, and blue, then we get more of a bluish color, and that's probably more accurate. So we can see that the opposite of the standard colors are bluish, green, and cyan, more of that color. So we can kind of look at this color here. That's why we want the green screen to be anywhere from blue, maybe even cyan, or to green. And I'll go ahead and tell you one advantage actually blue does have over green, and that is the fact that blue is more opposite to skin color. Like I have an example here, there's like some skin, a lot of brown colors, and that's why I use a blue screen, because it's more opposite. It'll make it easier in post. So I can go and show you, if you invert it, it's kind of a blue color. So blue is actually more the opposite. I haven't dealt with very many blue screens, even though theoretically they seem to work pretty well. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you, 90% of the time on average, green screens do the trick. So the first thing I want to point out is a lot of people when they do tutorials, it's not really fair because they have like this perfect lit green screen. This is actually just a green solid, but anyway, it's like a perfect lit green screen. They're like, hey, I'm gonna teach you how to do a chroma key, and they just add it and just key. We're done. Yeah, so easy. And it's not really fair because a lot of times the viewer may have a more challenge, may have not quite so perfect green screen. So like I always say, you want to go for the worst case scenario, and that allows room for a lot of techniques because it's not always going to be perfect. And what if the key's not so good? In tutorials you got to bring out these challenges. So today in this video we're gonna have some pretty challenging clips that we're gonna learn a lot of techniques. We're gonna deal with a lot of this hair, when it's not such a perfect example, because I'm sure for a lot of you it isn't so perfect. Alright, so sorry it took so long to get to the actual tutorial, but we're going to go ahead and get started now. So let's go ahead and remove all this stuff. Let's go ahead and start with this example because it is a nice example. So the first step is to limit the range of colors that you have to key out, and that's very important. Because see these dark colors over here, think about it. We're going to have to turn up the amount of pixels it removes, and if these colors are the same colors as these transparent hairs, then it's going to remove that hair and attempt to remove all the green screen. But if we remove that previously, then we can have a nicer key. Let me show you what I mean. And how we're going to do this is create a simple garbage mask. So go ahead and grab your pen tool, select the footage, grab your pen tool, and just go ahead and start masking around the subject. And you'll suppose the subject does move out of the garbage mask. What you can actually do is add keyframes. So click the footage and hit M, and it'll open the mask property. Add a keyframe, put it like you want it at a certain point in time, move to another point in time, and just move it exactly how you want it. And it'll add 2 keyframes, so it'll move from one position to the other, so your garbage mask won't chop out some of your subject. So, and the garbage mask is very important, like I'm saying, because it's going to limit the colors that we have to remove in hopes to preserve as much of the foreground as possible. That being said, let's go ahead and click on our footage, apply the key light effect. So basically you can go up here to Effect, Keying, Key Light, but it's easier just to type it in right here. So I'll always type in my effects right here, so key light. So let's go ahead and apply this to our footage. So with your footage selected, double click. There we go. Let's go ahead and hide mask. And by the way, it's a cool technique. What you can do actually is just click this mask button right here and it'll hide all your mask. And if you want to hide everything, hit Control Shift H. And if you want to bring it back, hit Control Shift H. It will toggle between the two. Alright, so we'll just go ahead and hide mask like this. And then what we're going to do is grab this eyedropper tool on the key light effect. Make sure that your footage is selected. Click the eyedropper tool and hit the green screen. Alright, so most of you probably know that. If you're a beginner, probably not. But that's the basic thing that we're going to do. So you can toggle between their transparency grid in case you have some dark hair that you can't see or not. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to more perfectly view our matte. So there's 2 ways to do this. What you can do is actually go to the screen matte in the key light view option. Or you have a better option to go down here to this RGB button right here and then choose alpha. So and the reason why this is better than screen matte is because this right here accounts for all the effects, and the key light screen matte just counts for the key light effect. So I may have mentioned this, but never leave your view on final result. Click on the final result and go to intermediate result. So you can see here that we can perfectly view what has been keyed out and what has not been keyed out. Alright, obviously it's pretty self-explanatory that the gray areas are semi-transparent and the white areas are fully opaque and then the black areas are keyed out. And on a very basic level of understanding, you know that we don't want those transparent areas where the green screen is, because nothing's supposed to be there. So the first thing we can change is our screen gain. So we can turn this up just barely. I wouldn't recommend turning this up much at all. So possibly 103, 105, probably not more than 115, depending on your situation. So over here I'm going to go about 105. The second thing we want to mess with is the screen balance. So when we shift this, you can see what happens. Just things change a little bit. And basically what it's doing is actually changing the color of your screen. And a lot of times this just works better. So changing the screen balance essentially is just changing the actual color of your key. So if we change this more towards the blue, it's the same exact thing as changing the screen balance to a lower value. So it's just changing the hue of the color selected. That's all screen balance is doing. And you can just adjust this to whatever you think fits your key most appropriately. Usually I find that turning the screen balance down helps, but that's just because usually my green screen is a little more on the blue side instead of towards the yellow side. So if your green screen is a little more yellow, you might want to turn your screen balance up, and if it's more blue, you want to turn it down a little bit. I'm going to go for about 35, and I think that works best for this particular case. So you can see here that this key is actually pretty good. We don't have much semi-transparent areas over here, but basically we want to get rid of those. And we want to be very careful with this part, because when we get rid of this, we might actually get rid of some of this. So we want to be very careful to only remove this without removing any of our other transparent areas. So let's go ahead and go down here to screen matte, and this is basically the only other setting we need to mess with in the key light effect. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to clip the black. And what you can do is just slowly increase the clip black, and that's just going to get rid of some of those dark gray areas. So if we just barely increase this just enough, it clipped all those transparent areas out, but over here it didn't clip much of this out because we very subtly changed the value. So maybe we can go something like 8 so that we won't remove so much of this hair. And if there's some transparency on your foreground, you want to turn down the clip white so it gets rid of those gray areas on your subject, because you don't want your subject to be transparent. So this example right here is actually better, because you can see that our subject actually has some transparent areas inside of him. So if we turn down that clip white, it'll just contrast it so those transparent areas will now be fully opaque. So there we go. We just turn this clip white value down so our subject will not be transparent. And we can, like I said, we can clip the black to make sure the background is completely transparent. But you want to be very careful with these values so we don't clip the areas that actually need to be transparent. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you something cool. This is something kind of cool. Clipping the black and white values is actually the same as the alpha property on the curves effect. So if you go add a curves effect and go to the alpha settings, you can actually more dynamically adjust the opacity ranges with this curves effect, because you can mess with any level of opacity. And basically clipping it is just like moving the bottom part of the curve down, so it's just clipping the transparent values. So if there's ever a case where the white and black is not doing the trick, you have more flexibility when you use this curves effect, because you can adjust any level of opacity. But anyway, 95% of the time this clip black and white will work. So let's go ahead and do about 8, and then we'll do this about 95. So we can actually go back to our RBG to see the original clip, and it looks pretty good. We can turn on our transparency grid. So it's looking pretty good. I mean, and the hairs don't look the best. They look kind of grainy, and we're going to work on that. But this is actually a really good key so far. And this is one of the easier examples, because I'm going to show other harder examples where it's going to be a little more tricky to get this perfect result. Also, while we're at it, I want to show you how to understand this status view. So you can click view and do status, and it's going to show this a little more of a strange setup. And basically, this just shows you where there are transparent areas, alright? So even if it's just slightly opaque, it's going to do completely great to show you that there's transparent areas there. So you can actually get a more clear view of what areas actually are transparent to any degree. And then we can adjust those settings appropriately. We only want the gray to be where there's supposed to be transparent areas. Like here, there's not supposed to be transparent areas over here. But if you go to the screen matte, you can see, okay, well it's barely opaque, so I'll just leave it be. Even though in the status you can see that there actually is information there. But if it's not harming anything, we can leave those slightly opaque pixels there because it's not hurting anything. Also, when you finish with your key, you want to make sure and go through several frames to make sure it looks good with all the frames and not just one frame, because your green screen could change, the lighting could change a little bit, the angle could change, different pixels will be in different places. So you want to make sure and go to different places in your footage to make sure that the key works properly. Now, if it does change, you could change your settings to where it works with both frames, but you also want to consider the fact that you can actually keyframe all of these controls. For example, the screen gain, you can hit a keyframe here, go forward into your footage, forward in time, and if you want to turn up the screen gain, you can do that. Just turn it up, and now it'll be different places. Hit U to see your keyframes, and basically what happened is, over time, your screen gain will increase because you added those keyframes. So be aware that you can add keyframes to the screen gain, even screen color, everything, to make sure it fits every single frame. Now, here is like the second most important thing you can do when keying, alright? And it's adding a key cleaner effect. It's so wonderful. Let's go to the effects and presets and type in key cleaner. And it's 2 words, key cleaner, and basically just drag this onto your footage after the key light effect. And basically it's going to search for those edges and pretty much find them. It's going to find the proper edges of your footage. So let's go ahead and look at it before and after. It smoothed it out and just found those edges, and it works so nicely. The key cleaner, I'm so impressed with After Effects adding that key cleaner effect. And I'm in After Effects CC, so I'm not actually sure when they added the key cleaner effect, but you can look that up and see. But it's a very nice effect. But if you're stuck with one of the old CS After Effects version, the Creative Suite After Effects, you really need to consider updating to CC, because there's a lot of features that they added. There's a lot of effects, plugins, and features that they added to the new After Effects, and it really is helpful. So definitely consider updating to the CC. And if for nothing else, do it for this key cleaner effect, because the key cleaner effect is so amazing for your keys. So firstly, we can increase the additional edge radius to show what it's going to examine, how far it's going to search for those edges. So if we turn it up a lot, then it's going to search with a further radius for details and edges. So we want to keep this probably about anywhere from 5 to 20, maybe something like 12. I'm going to do about 12, and that's going to work nicely for this effect. And then we can even do things like increase the alpha contrast, which is going to sharpen the edge. And a lot of times I like to leave this down to a very low value, if not 0. And then we can increase the strength. If you don't like the effect so much, you can turn down the strength. So we're going to do 100% because it looks really sweet. Here's the last thing I want to mention. This reduce chatter feature is very nice. So basically, have you ever seen your keys like Google, like you play it and then they're just like Googling around? And that's not fun when your keys do that. It's so annoying. But when you click this reduce chatter, it gets rid of that. And it works actually very impressively, because it gets rid of all that the keys Googling around, stuff like that. Very annoying. But this reduce chatter feature gets rid of that. So it's very amazing. So I'm very impressed with this key cleaner effect. So be sure to add that to your key. And we can look at this key so far, and it's looking so perfect. I mean, look at that. Look at the hair, how much detail we actually preserved from all that hair and everything. Looking good. Now here's the third problem. The third problem is that there's a little bit of green spill. It's called spill. And basically there's several ways to get rid of this, but the easiest way is to add an advanced spill suppressor. So here in the keying section we have advanced spill suppressor. It does the trick wonderfully. If you're in the method standard, it completely detects the color that you keyed out and it just gets rid of all that green so wonderfully. Now we have two options here. We can go either to the standard or ultra. Now a lot of times the ultra works better. I'm going to kind of show you an example why. So I'm going to kind of turn out the brightness. We can see that ultra is actually brighter than standard. When we have standard darkens and ultra it brightens, it just leaves the same amount of brightness. And sometimes it looks good when you darken it, but other times it can be bad. I'm going to kind of show you why. Because sometimes when it darkens green areas, it has like kind of an effect kind of like this. I mean, not nearly this exaggerated, but it looks something kind of like this when it darkens sometimes. So you want to be careful with using standard. So if you see some kind of bad artifacts like this when it darkens, then make sure to go to ultra. And also, not very often at all, not very often, but sometimes standards can have a little bit of glitches in it. So just be careful with that. In this case, I'll probably use standard. So what I actually did here was turn the exposure up over here, and that's actually a nice feature. I turned the exposure up over here just to kind of see things. So be aware of that feature. Now sometimes you have these kind of harsh dark edges, and that's really not fun to have. There's actually a pretty nice way to get rid of this, and it works so awesome. Let me go ahead and show you what it is. If you go to your effects and presets right here and search in refine, choose refine hard matte. Basically, you don't want any of these features. Turn the feather to 0, contrast 0, edge shift 0, reduce chatter. Sometimes you might want something like reduce chatter, but for now 0. You might sometimes want that motion blur. If there's a fast action scene, the motion blur actually helps a lot of times. But in this case, we don't want any motion blur. But what we want is this dominate edge colors. And look what it did. Look how wonderfully it got rid of that harsh edge, and it does that everywhere. And sometimes it works so well that we don't even need to use advanced spill suppressor. The refined hard matte can actually get rid of those green colors around the edges. Now if there's green colors on the face or something, you want to use that advanced spill suppressor. But in this example, the only green colors was actually on the edge, and the refined hard matte actually fixed those colors around the edge. So I'm definitely impressed with this dominate edge colors. It works nice with getting rid of those harsh edges, and I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that, not knowing how to get rid of it. But this refined hard matte, awesome technique. Hope you find use in that, because it really is useful. And you can actually view where it's fixing right here, where these white places are where it's fixing the colors, and you just check that box there to see what it's doing. And also we have this increased domination domination radius. I think it was, yeah, domination radius. We can just increase that so it'll examine more areas. But we need to leave this alone because it's working good as it is now. And you know, in the more it has to examine, the harder it's going to be on your system. So if you don't need to increase this, don't do it, so it can render faster. So this is massively impressive. Look how amazing this key is. Let's take a little preview. So take a look at this. Look how beautifully consistent. There's no, like I said, googling artifacts or details like that. Perfectly smooth, and we have no edge chatter. It's so awesome. And you're actually seeing the very worst of this because we have this dark hair against the white transparent background. And the final composite will actually look a lot better than this. But with the black against white, those errors really stand out. But there's not really much errors to stand out because this is working so flawlessly. So I hope you've enjoyed this technique so far, but we've got so much more to cover. So let's go ahead and continue to the next example. So this is our second example, and actually in the first we didn't cover that many techniques because it was more of an introduction to King, showing those who don't have much experience, just getting the basic key down. But this one I got a lot of techniques to cover that I didn't in the previous example, so we're gonna be shooting out techniques like crazy. Let's go ahead and get started. Obviously, the first thing we need to do is add that garbage mask. The first piece of advice I have when adding garbage mask is to have these long tangents, so you can really adjust it without very many keyframe points, so it'll be kind of easy to fix and move around. So obviously your screen is probably going to move around, so you gotta add a keyframe. Hit M, add a keyframe to that mask path, go to the end, just move this around, double click on your mask to open that little transform thing, and then we can just adjust those tangents like I said without having to move very many points, so we have those long tangents. There we go. So this should be pretty easy, nothing much to this. Alright, so we have 3 keyframes. That probably should work. Let's go ahead and go to this example right here, I guess. So there's a lot of different colors and shades in this example. And the garbage mask really helped with removing a lot of those unwanted colors. But a lot of times you can't add a garbage mask, that big of a garbage mask, because somebody's moving around, maybe they're doing a fight scene or something, and you can't really do a garbage mask, so it doesn't really work. So let's pretend we can't do such a tight garbage mask. So let me go ahead and expand it just, for worst case scenario, right? So let's go ahead and add our first key light effect. Go to the effects and presets, add the key light to the footage. Alright, now let's go ahead and choose, and basically when you choose the color, you want to choose one of the less saturated colors, alright? Because if you choose the saturated ones, it's going to key out those, but it's going to leave behind the desaturated. But if you key out the desaturated, then it's going to take the saturated ones with it. Alright, so I'm going to choose something maybe like this, because it's more of the desaturated greens. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we have so far. So I may have mentioned this before in the previous example, but never leave your view on final result. Click on the final result and go to intermediate result, because I'm going to go ahead and tell you why. Because final result changes your colors, and if you're using final result, you can't use any effects after. It completely changes the color, gets rid of your alpha information. Never use final result. Alright, go to intermediate result. Intermediate only changes the opacity of the pixels. It doesn't mess with the colors and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and click down here, go to alpha, and then you can see here we have a key. Now what we're going to do is basically just turn the screen gain up, and what we're going to do is basically create our own garbage mask, but it's going to be a lot better. Check this out. Go to screen matte, just turn the black up. Don't be too careful with this, and turn the clip white down. Basically what I'm going to do is go to the screen shrink grow and turn this to a positive value. So basically we're going to create that garbage mask, and the garbage mask is going to very closely surround our character. Basically it's just a garbage mask that stays very close around the figure. So if they're doing some kind of fight scene, adding keyframes to this mask and stuff. This is going to give us a lot less pixels to key out, so we can be more careful with how much we take out to preserve the foreground. So that technique right there is super helpful. Let me go ahead and show you another one. A lot of times you have these dark, ugly wrinkles in your screen, and there's a very, very nice way to fix that. Let's add a shadow and highlight effect. Now this is like one of my favorite effects of all time, and it's actually better than I originally thought it was. It does something pretty complicated. What it does is it brightens the dark areas, not the dark pixels. You can play around with this, but it's really sweet. Basically, go ahead and uncheck auto amounts, and that's going to really brighten up those dark areas. It's going to take a before and after. So it might be kind of hard to see, but the shadow and highlight really does help your keys. So you want to apply it before the key light, so key light can utilize those advantages. You can also mess with the highlight amount, but I don't see any highlights in the green screen, so we'll probably not turn this more than 15. You can turn this down probably a little bit, it's probably 35. Now when we apply a key light, it's really going to help out with keying out those dark areas. The problem is that it does, suppose you don't want your foreground colors to be affected by the shadow and highlight. Suppose it does help your key, but you don't like the foreground colors, even though shadow and highlight does make your foreground look a lot better a lot of times. But suppose you don't like those advantages, we're going to fix that later on, so don't worry about that. Alright, so we went over a way to brighten those dark areas with the shadow and highlight effect, and it worked really nice. But I'm going to show you a way you can take this even further. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the effects and presets and add an invert effect. So just type in invert. So we'll apply this and make sure to apply it before the key light effect, because we're going to add some advantages, and we want key light to be able to use those advantages to make a better key. So what we're going to do is go to invert channel, and we're not going to do RGB, we're going to go to lightness. Alright, so light is going to invert the lightness. It's going to leave the color, the hue the same, but it's going to invert the brightness or lightness. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the blend with original and just blend with about 50%. Alright, so basically what this does, it makes every single color the same amount of brightness, because it inverts it and then it blends with the original, so it meets in the middle. So every single color has the same amount of brightness no matter where you go on this picture. So you can see what we did here. There were dark areas that we would have to really turn the gain on our key light up to reach those areas, to remove those areas. But when we inverted it, we made every pixel the same amount of brightness, so it's going to be easier to key this out. And if the effect is too extreme, you can turn this down to maybe 75, so it blends with the original a little bit more. But the point of this is we can make this as dramatic as we want, because we have the original to make every single pixel the same amount of brightness, or even go to the opposite. So we have whatever range we want to go to. And for this example, I'll probably do something like 75. 75 is a nice blend value. So it's going to be easier for us to key that out. And we definitely do have some problems with, our footage is now messed up. It's not the right brightness and everything, because we did this invert effect. And even the shadow and highlight may have messed it up. But the point is to get a good key first. If we get a good key, don't worry about the footage. We just want a good key. Then we'll work with the footage. And it's actually very easy to fix once we have the right key. So that's our main goal right now. Just do whatever it takes to get a good alpha matte, get a good key. Now, yeah, sometimes you're going to have these like dark shadows and stuff like that in your screen. And like I said, techniques like these, the shadow and highlight and the invert, really help out. But sometimes you might just want to brighten this area. So what you can do is create an adjustment layer. You can do Control Alternate Y, that's a good shortcut. And basically, just click on this adjustment layer, click on the pen tool, and mask around that dark area. It's good to just to brighten it. Now a lot of times, like I said, the shadow and highlight works really good. But also a lot of times, just making a mask and brightening it up is better. So we'll add a brightness and contrast effect to this adjustment layer. Apply it to the adjustment layer, and then we'll just brighten it up. And then we'll just add some feather. Click F, add some feather to that mask. There we go. That really helps out sometimes when you just brighten up a certain area. It really helps out our key, brighten up our key. And also I said these shadow and highlight invert really help too. But what happens is sometimes when you brighten it, it might lose saturation. So what we can do is add a vibrance effect to that brightening adjustment layer and just turn the saturation or vibrance up to better match the brighter colors. Now that being said, that adds some difficulties because now we had an adjustment layer, and now if we just add the key light effect to this layer, then it's not going to see that adjustment because the adjustment is made on a different layer after the footage. So what we can do is actually create another adjustment layer above that one, and we can add the key light to that adjustment layer because there's nothing that says that you can't add key light to adjustment layers. Alright, so we'll add key light to that top adjustment layer. So I hope you see the reason why we added this key light to an adjustment layer above the brightening area. Because if we add it to the footage, the key light wouldn't see that brighten adjustment we did there. But if we add an adjustment layer above the brighten area, then the key light can notice that adjustment we did and utilize those advantages. Because adjustment layers work with any effect. There's nothing that says that we can't use key light with an adjustment layer. So that being said, basically what I'm going to do is copy all these effects right here. Grab all of them, hit Control C, and go to the key light adjustment layer, delete this, and hit Control V. So now the effects will be applied after that brightening adjustment to help out. Now what we can do is add another key light effect. So add another adjustment layer, and then I'll add another key light to that adjustment layer. So I'll grab the eyedropper tool and just select this color. So I hope you see the idea of limiting these colors, because the more colors we limit, the less colors that we'll have to remove, and we do that in hopes to preserve the foreground, because we don't want to remove colors from the subject so that it will be transparent. So the less amount of colors that we have to remove, the better, because that'll preserve our subject and make it a better key. So let's go ahead and turn this on and make this a good key. Like I said, we probably need to select the desaturated areas. So we'll go ahead and uncheck this effects button right here, and then we'll select the more desaturated colors. So that'll help out a little bit. And like I said, never turn it to final result, always do intermediate result. We're just going to refine this, make it look good. Use those techniques we used before to make this look good. Alright, so I made all the adjustments I want. I added all those adjustments to the key light right here, and then I added key cleaner effect. So I got the key just about how I want it, so it looks good. But now remember that those colors are messed up because we added that brightening area, then we messed with the the shadow and highlights, and we did invert and all kinds. Just messed up the colors a lot. So here's what we're gonna do to fix that. Grab all your adjustment layers, all your footage and everything. We're going to grab all those layers and hit pre-compose, move all attributes into new composition. So basically this will now be our footage. So now it's one layer. Basically what we can do is go in here, copy our original footage, hit Control C, go up here, go back to the main composition, hit Control V. So we'll rename this, hit enter, rename this original footage. Then what we're going to do is we're going to rename this to keyed footage. So we have the original footage right here, and then we have the keyed footage right here. So we want to drag the original footage down to the bottom. Then hit toggle switches modes until we see track matte feature right here. Then we'll go to this drop down menu right here and then click alpha matte. So basically what this did is it robbed the alpha matte from this keyed footage, but used the colors or pixels of the original footage. So we intelligently put the keyed footage above the original footage so that when we hit track matte, it would steal that matte. So now we have the advantages of both. We have the original colors of the original footage, but then we have the matte of the keyed footage. So now this works out perfectly. So one thing is very important that you understand order, okay? So you have to make those adjustments before you make the actual key, because if you make the adjustments after you make the key, it's not going to affect your alpha matte. It's not going to affect anything. So make sure you make the adjustments before you make the key. I know a lot of beginners don't understand that. You have to make the adjustments, make all the things you want to do before you do the key. Then you can key it out so the key can, like I said, utilize those advantages. Now let's suppose you have a lot of bad green spill. Now, this is fake. I added some, some green spill. But sometimes that really hurts your key, because when you do the key, it keys out, the foreground. That's really bad. So I'm going to show you a way you can actually fix this. And it's actually a pretty barbaric, caveman, straightforward way of doing this. But basically what we're going to do is copy the key light effect to an adjustment layer. So hit Control X. It's going to cut it. And then we're adding an adjustment layer by holding Control Alternate Y. And hit Control V to paste the key light effect. And basically what you can do is go to this adjustment layer and just mask out key light from that area. So just mask out this area. And then hit M, and then we're going to turn this mask to subtract. So basically it's subtracting key light from that area. So key light, the key light effect is not applying to this area because we hit subtract. And basically we masked out this adjustment layer from this place. So you can kind of visualize it. So the key light is only applying to this place right here. So when we apply it, boom, it doesn't affect this place right here. So that's the advantage. Now we probably do have to add keyframes for this because it's going to move around a little bit. So just hit M like that, and then just click the stopwatch right here, add a keyframe, go forward in your, go forward in time, and just move it around to make sure that it doesn't go out of place. Maybe add a little feather. So hit F and add a little bit of feather, and just keyframe that around to make sure that it doesn't go off the subject like this. So now you don't want it to do that. So make sure it stays on your subject. So just add some keyframes, move it around, do what it takes so that key light doesn't apply to that certain place of your footage. So that's a very straightforward, barbaric way of accomplishing that effect. Now also, if you use key light as an adjustment layer and not directly applying it to the footage, if you use it as an adjustment layer, then make sure and grab the adjustment layer in the footage and everything and pre-compose it so it won't affect other objects, other background objects in your scene. So pre-compose it, make sure to remove all attributes in new composition. There we go. So he's composited into our scene. So basically, in this example, there's some spill, so you would want to add an advanced spill suppressor, and there we go. Just apply it to our footage and it gets rid of all that green. Like I said, you can turn this to ultra if you don't like how it darkens those greens like that. So I get several backgrounds here just to test it out. Suppose I like this one. Okay, so we're going to use this one. Let me just flip it around. So sometimes, like I said, you can have these harsh edges like that. You see that edge right there? And basically, I'm going to show you another way to fix that. Even though the Refine Hard Matte did work very nicely, and then Redominate Edge Colors works really nicely because it gets rid of that harsh edge. But I'm going to show you another way we can actually do this. So what we can do is actually add another key light adjustment to our footage. Now, what this is, we're not going to change the opacity or transparency or key out anything with this. Basically, we're going to use one of its cool properties down here, as you can actually change the edge brightness or color correction. We'll go down here to this tab, check Enable Edge Color Correction. So basically, what we're allowed to do is just turn up the brightness and everything of the edges, and you can turn up the edge softness to extend it out into further into the footage. And basically, we can just turn up the brightness of the footage, and we can just adjust this however we want. We can also go down here to color balancing. We can just kind of tint it to a certain color. Open up the wheel here, maybe tint it towards pink or something, So basically this is cool because sometimes we really need that to blend into our footage. If the edge is too dark or if it's too light, we can just really have a lot of control here to change brightness and everything of our actor around the edge to make it blend in with the environment better. So before, after. So that really does help, because we tinted that kind of pink color and we brightened it up a little bit, so it really helps just blend it into the environment. So be aware of that feature, the edge color correction. That's the easiest way to do it on After Effects. Pretty sweet. And when we do this edge color correction, we want to make sure that the key light view is on final result, and that's very important, because you remember what I said, intermediate result only affects the opacity of pixels, and final result is what changes the colors and everything. So when we do the key, we do want it to be on intermediate result, so it will only affect the opacity and not ruin the color and everything. But for effects like these where we're changing the color of the edge and everything, we want to change this to final result, because final result is what changes colors, and edge color correction is actually changing the colors of our edges and everything. But it's very important that you have two effects. One key light effect is for keying out, the green screen and everything, and the second key light effect is for this edge color correction. So make sure there's two separate effects. So there we go. Before, after. Before, after. Wonderful, wonderful. So it's really hard to remember all of my techniques. I'm trying to remember them all and put all of my keying techniques into this video. But I want to show you one last alternative to key cleaner. So let's go ahead and remove key cleaner, so we just have the key light effect. And this effect is called Refine Soft Matte. This effect can be really good and really bad at the same time. First, I'm going to say the things that are really, really good about it. Let's go ahead and put it in at least half resolution so we can kind of see what's going on here. Firstly, the good things about it is that it really finds those edges. Take a look before and take a look after. look at that detail it adds. So wonderful. And that looks really good. It adds so much detail. It finds all those edges. You can actually see the region that it's searching for those edges. And it is a lot better than Key Cleaner as far as finding those edges. So that works really nice about it. Also, another thing good about it, that it has the dominate edge color feature. So like we said down here where that harsh edge was before, well, it fixes things like that. So altogether, this Refined Soft Matte does have a lot of advantages when you add it to our keyed footage, because it finds those edges, it fixes a lot of problems, and let me go ahead and tell you a few other good things about it. Let me show you something. Let me go ahead and mask a little hole here. Like, suppose there's a little hole in our footage. So let me go ahead and turn this to subtract. There's a little hole in our footage. Guess what happens when we turn Refined Soft Matte on? Boom, that hole disappears. And it knows that hole's not supposed to be there, because when it sees little small holes like that, it gets rid of them. And you know it gets rid of them because when you check View Edge Region, if that yellow completely covers the hole, then it's going to get rid of the hole. So that's how it works. So if we make this hole too big, and the yellow doesn't cover the hole, like that, so it's not going to get rid of the hole now. See, it doesn't get rid of the hole. It tries to find an edge, but it doesn't get rid of the hole because the edge region does not cover the entire thing like that. But if we make it smaller, then it's going to fill in the hole because the edge region covers the entire hole. So that's the way that works. Now, even though that seems like an advantage, there are disadvantages to that. Let me try to show you an example. Take a look at something like this right here. Let's go ahead and add Refined Soft Matte to this footage and see what happens. Although it does do a nice job finding those edges, it fills in holes like this, and sometimes those holes do not need to be filled in. It happens a lot around the elbow. Like if we go forward, there's probably going to be a hole right here that's going to fill in. And a lot of times it just doesn't look nice because it fills in those holes that sometimes we really want to be there. Also, as another advantage and disadvantage at the same time, depending on your footage, it gets rid of little spots. If you have a little spot on your green screen that you don't want to be there, if the view edge region covers the entire spot, like this right here, it covers the entire spot, it's going to get rid of that spot, which is nice sometimes, but sometimes we have spots that we want to keep. So there's a lot of good advantages and bad advantages to this Refined Soft Matte effect. So I've had like a lot of experience with Refined Soft Matte. I used to use a lot. I found all the advantages and disadvantages. And another disadvantage it actually has is it causes a lot of chatter. You remember I was talking about before about this googling keys, like shaking around the keys where the edges kind of google around. Well, Refined Soft Matte tends to cause that sometimes because it really by detail searches for those edges, and by every frame it doesn't search the same exact way, so it adds a little bit of Google sometimes. But that can be fixed when you turn this chatter reduction on to like smoother, slower, something like that. It'll reduce that chatter, but then it takes a long time for it to render. So if you turn that on, it's going to get rid of that chatter. There are a lot of nice things about Refined Soft Matte. For example, this clip where there's no holes and it works just fine, we can use Soft Matte in this case. But you know, other cases like this one where there's going to be holes, like action scenes and stuff like that, we can't use Refined Soft Matte because it's going to fill in those holes that we actually want to be there. Also, another good feature, just like Refined Hard Matte, Refined Soft Matte also has motion blur, alright? So we can add motion blur, things like that. And then it also has these other features like feather, contrast, smooth. You can play with those, but they're not really necessary because we can make all those adjustments inside the key light effect itself. Anyway, Refined Soft Matte can be really good or really bad depending on your scene, but I wanted to throw that out there in case you guys find it helpful. So we can kind of do another experiment here. Here is the Key Cleaner, and here is the Refined Soft Matte. So you can see the Refined Soft Matte does get more of those details, helps it look a little bit better sometimes. Also, you can consider the fact that Key Cleaner renders much faster. Alright, so here's Refined Soft Matte, and here's Key Cleaner. So it's Refined Soft Matte, Key Cleaner, Refined Soft Matte, Key Cleaner, Refined Soft Matte, Key Cleaner. So there's advantages to both of them. So don't confuse the two. There's Refined Hard Matte, which just has the dominate edge colors, and there's Refined Soft Matte, which calculates edge details and stuff like that. So don't confuse those, Refined Hard Matte and Refined Soft Matte. But you can see that both Refined Hard Matte and Refined Soft Matte have this dominate edge color here and here. Both of them have it. And one thing I want to warn you is that you can't use Key Cleaner after you use that dominate edge color because it actually restructures the pixels on the scene. So if we try to add Key Cleaner after that, guess what happens? It just messes up because the pixels are already restructured. When Key Cleaner tries to find an edge, it just messes up. So we can't use like a Key Cleaner after we use this dominant edge colors either on Refined Hard Matte or Refined Soft Matte. Both of them have dominant edge colors. We can't use Key Cleaner after we do that. I mean, when you do keying for so long, you do all these keying techniques. I'm trying to fit them all into one video. This video has actually turned out really long, so I'm really sorry about that. But I'm trying to fit in and compact all the information so it'll help you guys out. I think this is probably the longest tutorial I've ever done in the history of V-Universe. I just know there's something out there that I missed. But hey, comment your questions about anything, anything I missed, because I can't really do everything in the video. And when we have community discussions, everyone learns so much, and it's one of the best ways of spreading intelligent information, by discussions. So go ahead and comment something, and it's likely that I'll reply. And hey, if you enjoyed, gaining the knowledge that I presented in this video, leave a like. It took a lot of time to put this episode together. Likes are so helpful, and be sure to subscribe. Blast that red subscribe button. I try to provide, techniques and knowledge to you and my other viewers that maybe isn't covered in other places. But anyway, it's time this long episode has come to an end. Hope you've learned something. It's been so fun. I'm excited to catch you in the next video of Visionary Universe.